Welcome back to another mini episode of my podcast, the Authentic Man Podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm a men's dating, relationship and intimacy coach. I really guide men to deeper connection across the board of relating, dating, intimacy, as well as a deeper connection with themselves, and also experiencing masculinity from a point of view that is healthy and is positive effect on their lives and the lives of the people that they meet. But today we're going to talk about male sex toys, fleshlights. I'm going to talk about fleshlights because I think that's the most accessible thing for most men. You know, you've got things like, anal plugs and anal vibrators and stuff like that. And we can include that in the conversation, I may do. But I want to talk about fleshlights and also female sex toys from a point of view of like the way that we judge people and the opinions we have about people if they have sex toys. But before that, I'm just going to let you know that I have a 12-week program coming up. It starts in September. I've run this program twice already with 2 cohorts of men and seen really incredible transformation in these men's lives. Like transformation that I didn't expect men to experience, them feeling like their whole lives have changed, that they've left being different people, they're reborn, they've transformed their relationships from being deeply disconnected and unhappy to being really closely connected with beautiful sex and intimacy. There's men who hadn't been on dates for 2 or 3 years that once they went through the program, they started dating very actively and having really beautiful dating experiences and, more confidence and self-expression. So we go through a whole of what I call kind of like foundational bricks of masculinity, and then go into some more advanced stuff as well towards the program to really help you feel confident and comfortable and self-expressed, as well as building like a brotherhood of men who help you grow and evolve, while also, getting to the root of some of these unconscious self-limiting beliefs that we have that are holding us back in life, not just in dating and relating, but also in our careers and our general expression of being human beings. So if that sounds like something you would like to jump on, something that you'd be interested in, there's a link in the show notes that will take you straight to a little form you fill out, and then I will book a call in with you and we will get that rolling. But let's talk about sex toys. So you got fleshlights, right? So let me talk a bit about fleshlights. Fleshlights it's a kind of masturbation tool. They come in various different guises. Like some of them look a bit like a vagina. Sometimes they look a bit like a mouth. Some of them I've heard of ones that are almost self-lubricating. I've heard of ones that have vibrators inside them. They look in different ways. It's a male masturbation tool or self-pleasure tool. And then obviously for women, you've got a lot of different sex toys, and there's so many. There is non-vibrating dildos, there's vibrators, there's clitoral stimulation, there's things that go in the anus, there's things that are just for nipples, stuff that give electric shocks, and then I guess you have all the things that are kind of neutral, non-gendered, like if you're into BDSM, whips and chains and handcuffs and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff, right? But for men, it's actually quite limited. I think, you've got fleshlights, you've got various kind of anal and perineum stimulators, but there's not that much else really for men. The whole market for male sex toys is very small at the moment, and I'm sure some companies going to really get into this. Why do I think it's small? I think men have... from my experience of working with men, and this is no judgment, is that men have a very limited range of experienced pleasure. Not to say that men have a limited range of pleasure, it's just most men have only really experienced pleasure that comes from the penis. Mainly, a very small number of men have indulged in anal play. So I think men are far less likely to see sex toys as something that's interesting to them. Often I think they just go with the hand, or if they're with a woman or a man, that's all they have. But I actually think sex toys can be amazing for men as well. And for women, obviously, like I've bought partners, also one of I think the first Christmas present I bought her was a rose quartz wand. And I bought her various things like a womanizer and various other sex toys that we've used together and separately and so forth. My experience of fleshlights is that they have a very different feeling to, say, being with a woman and also being with your hand. So it's just another addition to pleasure. And I think as men, we are not really taught about our own pleasure. We just think that pleasure is like ejaculation, and we don't realize that actually everything that happens from, the time we start touching ourselves to ejaculation is actually also pleasure, meaning that we don't have to just race to ejaculation. We could enjoy the pleasure that happens in between and elongate it and make it even more pleasurable in different ways by touching different parts of our body and stimulating different parts of our body. And, this is something I've worked with a lot of men around, especially men who suffer from erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. There's often, what I see in them is that there's a singular pleasure instrument, which is their penis, and expanding their pleasure really helps them last longer in bed and get hard in the way that they want to. So I think there's a real limited range of pleasure for men, but they're not experiencing it, but there's so much to be had. I'm lucky that I have, learned a lot about tantra and massage and all these different ways in which we can feel pleasure. So my range of pleasure is really expanded beyond just like a quick wank or quick sex. It's very regular in our household for 4 hours of lovemaking to happen that stimulates multiple different parts of the body and mind, because it can get that deep if we really want to get into it. But let's talk about what it means about someone, what it means about a man. Let's start with, I'm going to go with, what doesn't it mean about a man if he has a fleshlight, right? Because I think there's a lot of meaning we place on that. What it doesn't mean about a man, if he's using a fleshlight or sex toys, is that he can't get real women, right? This is something I've seen said before, like, a real man, he only has sex with women, or he only, gets pleasure from women, or I guess, even the hand we slightly demonize more and more these days, right? From wanking, I mean. Also, if a man has a fleshlight or any sex toys, it doesn't mean that he's desperate. This is another thing we have, is like if a man enjoys pleasure or enjoys sex, that in somehow he's desperate or something like that. What it doesn't mean if a man has a fleshlight or sex toys is that, he doesn't need real women. That's another thing as well, right? This is this idea that like if a man has sex toys, then, he's not going to need a woman. He's not going to need real touch and all these sorts of things. This is often, I know women who've had, quite big reactions to their partners if they've had a sex toy, feeling almost jealous of the sex toy, feeling a comparison, like comparing themselves, like, if the sex toy is better than me, they're going to get rid of me. This kind of comparison and obsolescence idea. And I just want to say that, the men I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds now of men, I'll be verging on thousands soon. This is not the experience of them, right? If a woman has sex toys, right, what it doesn't mean about her, it doesn't mean that she can't get with real men if she wants to. It doesn't mean that she's always horny. It doesn't mean that she no longer needs a man. It doesn't mean that her partner isn't good enough. Right? That's another one. A lot of male partners of women who have sex toys, they become quite jealous of the sex toys, right? Because the sex toy can go all night, has batteries or directly plugged into the wall, as one woman that I dated had. But it doesn't mean that stuff, right? I don't know any woman, right, who I've ever talked about sex toys who said, I'd rather have a sex toy than a man. I've met a few women who, they've been burnt in difficult situations with men, and they feel that like the emotional side of being with a man is difficult, but they still have a preference to be with a man, right? Because of the weight, the presence, conversation, all those beautiful things that a sex toy can't give you. They're small usually, and they don't have any weight. They don't have any pressure. They don't create any mystery. They get to the orgasm very quickly or very efficiently, but it doesn't mean you're obsolete. So this idea that we need to be afraid of sex toys if our partner has one, male or female, is really, really based on our own insecurities, right? Our own fears about how good we are. Are we good enough lovers? Will we ever be good enough lovers? Things like this. It's the same kind of insecurity that has us worry if we have a partner who've had lots of sexual partners. We imagine that they're doing some sort of comparison, and then we are always going to be less. That's the idea we have in our minds, right? And the truth of it is that it's just not really happening, This is an insecurity that you can work through, sit down with a coach or a therapist and actually unpick, because that insecurity in sex and with your partner is probably influencing other areas of your life. So what does it mean if a man has a fleshlight or sex toys, right? It means that he is willing to explore his own pleasure. Isn't that amazing? A man who is willing to explore his own pleasure and is open-minded enough to do so, right? What does it mean also if a man has a fleshlight and he's willing to, or other sex toys, is that he actually likes pleasure, not just ejaculation, but pleasure in different bits, right? Because again, us men are taught that ejaculation is the only pleasure in sex, really. Like, we don't explore the in-betweens. We don't explore what it feels like for our whole body to be touched in different ways and different textures and so forth. And a fleshlight can be a gateway for a man to explore other types of touch and other types of toys, right? So it's like just a general open-mindedness you get, right? If a man has a fleshlight, especially if he's willing to talk about it. Like, I got mine, I use mine in workshops sometimes, or one of them has worked in workshops as a teaching aid for around the clitoris and touching the labia for pleasure for women. It's like, what it does mean if a man has fleshlight is just that he's just open to this, He's willing to try new things. Like, he is not as concerned about the judgment that he may get from other people for trying sex toys, right? Because there's a lot of judgment on men from women and from men around men using sex toys. They're desperate. Why would they need one? Because they have a partner and blah, blah, blah. So then if we get into, what does it mean if a woman has sex toys? It's very much the same as a man. She enjoys pleasure. She's taking responsibility for her pleasure. She's exploring her own body. She's exploring what different ways that she can experience and feel pleasure. And she's open-minded about sex toys. That's what it means, right? I'm not sure there's some other things I've missed out. It doesn't mean that if she dates men, that a man is obsolete to her, that she's always going to compare her sex toy to a man, or that if she has a boyfriend, right, and she uses her sex toys, that he's not good enough. It doesn't mean that stuff. That's our fears, our worries, our negative stories about ourselves that are coming in that place. So it's like, we don't need to get jealous of sex toys, right? They're not going to replace you. Your partner's not going to break up with you and then marry her dildo, or him marry his fleshlight. That is not going to happen, right? It's not going to mean that you're obsolete because your partner has a sex toy. It's not going to mean that your partner suddenly goes, well, I don't want to have sex with you. I'm just going to go and use my toy, right? And I say this as someone who, in my relationship with my partner also, if I haven't seen her, she's been away for a while, and I'll regularly say to her, like, oh, have you been masturbating? Have you been using your toys? It's very normal in our house. Or vice versa. She knows that I have a very mindful masturbation practice that I use for deeply connecting to my own body and my own pleasure, and for states of like real deep insight with myself, which I do a couple to a few times a week. And she'll ask me about that. There's no jealousy, because we know that our self-pleasure practices are not replacing each other, right? Your partner's not going to suddenly want to leave you because she much prefers her toys, right? And I just, more and more, I want to say this is, we need to move away from this idea that our partner kind of owns our sexual experience and our pleasure. Like, they're the only person that should be giving it to us, right? Or if you're listening to this, like feeling like you're the only person that should be giving pleasure or sexual exploration to your partner, right? They can do it for themselves, and it doesn't mean anything about you and how you've been doing and so forth. It can actually add to the relationship. I've definitely found sex toys and my own self-pleasure, my partner's self-pleasure, really adds to the sex in our relationship and the connection in our relationship. Right, so that's me wrapping up. As I said at the beginning, I've got a wonderful men's program where we actually get deeper into this kind of stuff around sexuality and pleasure, a man's pleasure, pleasuring a partner, and so forth, because this is something that I love to talk about. So it's inside of my work, and how to last longer and all those sorts of things are baked into the program. So if you're interested in the program, there's some details in the show notes that you can just whiz along and fill out and jump in. Until then, ciao, ciao.